morning, everyone. Oh, sorry, good afternoon. Feels like good morning still. So today, myself, I'm Adam Jacobs from Polycom, or Plantronics Polycom, until we come up with a better name. I'm an architect at Polycom, and I work specifically on our Microsoft solutions. For the beginning of this session, which is on integrating voice and video devices with Microsoft Teams, I'm going to hand over to Shri.
Hi, everybody. I am Shri Vidya Chandrasekharan. I am a product manager in the Microsoft Teams product group. And I'm here with Adam to talk about what we are doing with Polycom in the Teams space. So let's start off with what we believe would be value add for this session. An overview of voice and video. How do you transition to Microsoft Teams? How many folks here use Skype for Business Server? And, oh, that's a lot of hands. How many use Skype for Business Online? Equally good number. How many have started using Teams? I am happy to see that. All right, so as part of that, we have a lot of capabilities that we are actually bringing into Teams over the last year, and we also have partners and partner relationships that we work on for various products like devices and services, and how is it that we are going to bring it forward, and also specifically talking it from a Polycom integrations perspective as well. Teams. I'm not going to talk to you a lot about this slide, obviously, with the number of hands I saw raise up for Teams. Teams has been a collaborative hub that we introduced in the last year. It's been extremely successful. I just saw that live over here. And a few things we want to keep close to heart is it's not just about collaboration. It's not just about communication. It's about the experiences that you get and the productivity that you get by using Teams as a business software, as an enterprise software. Collaboration, we have capabilities of embedded files, embedded SharePoint, embedded Word document, as well as embedded third-party apps as well. You can have third-party apps like Smartsheet and all of that are embedded inside of Teams. So basically, our goal is you don't ever have to leave the Teams ecosystem. However, we do understand that there is a bunch of ecosystem beyond Teams, and our goal is how do we get those ecosystems of devices and services into Teams as well. And that's sort of going to be the key motto of this conversation over here. Given that you guys already have used, many of you have used Skype for Business Server or Skype for Business Online, from a features and capabilities perspective, Teams already has way more than what Skype for Business already has. For example, one of the key things that we have done with Teams is actually your persistent chat, your capabilities of chats and channels, and how are you able to organize your communication. Skype for Business was great for one-to-one communication, but there wasn't a whole lot of organization around it that you can actually go back and refer to. Teams provides you with that capabilities. User experiences. How simple is it for a user to just go and use the product? Do I have to go back to my Outlook in order to search for my history, or should that all be available in Teams natively? And how easy it is for me to just add third-party apps or use third-party apps? How easy it is for me to find a call button and be able to make that call, or have a group call, or invite other people into the call. We just want to have those very, very simple user experiences that Teams has achieved much better compared to Skype for Business client experiences. The key part of Teams and why it has been so successful for us in the span of a year is it's born and built in the cloud. The Azure cloud is our fundamental rock behind Teams and Teams infrastructure. That naturally gives us the Azure scalability and all of the capabilities that Azure has done. And the reason I'm calling this out is we have done certain optimizations for Teams to work on Azure, and that has become a very critical decision in some of the services we have jointly developed with Polycom. So I'll be... There you go, I have Teams on my mobile now. So, having said that, I want to call out some of the very key architecture as well as infrastructure differences. Again, this is sort of our fundamental stepping stone on not just what we do with our own products internally, but how is it that we are exposing our integrations that our partners and customers can leverage on. Teams, fundamentally, Teams is REST-based, HTTP REST-based. It's not the SIP-based protocol where you just follow the red line document and write your own custom client. This is critical because our devices for Skype for Business Server online, they have been SIP interop basically. For Teams though, we have taken a different approach. In addition, these are all microservices. These services can be deployed independently of each other, meaning I can have much more, many levels of scale for my media processing components like my conferencing nodes. I might not need as many for, let's say, scheduling or some other node. I can deploy these microservices independently and scale them as I need elastically. So let's say I have a huge number of conferences for whatever reason that's going on. Am I able to scale them? But I don't need as many scheduling at the moment, obviously, because that's not the operation that I'm getting overloaded on. So because of the fact that Teams is born and built on Azure and has a microservice-based architecture, this is all fundamental to Teams. And this is definitely a key difference from Skype for Business Server, as well as Skype for Business Online, which was much more of an integrated, a little bit of a monolithic a system that we have tried to decouple. So Teams has a lot of advantages in that aspect. In addition, Teams is a managed ecosystem. What we write on the server and what we write on the client, they are very cohesive. You can have the same client, literally the same bits that are operating on your desktop client, on your mobile clients, on your web clients, and on your device clients over here. And I'm pointing to Adam as my device representative. So basically, it's the same bits that are actually running across the board. There is no different versions of clients that we need to, make sure they are in sync. There is no different version for devices, and there is definitely no direct interop happening over here. So I've spoken all of that. So where does Polycom come into the picture? Polycom and Microsoft has a long history of operating together and working together for devices as well as for interop, starting from the time of Office Communication Server over here. So both of these key areas, from a devices perspective, we have a wide variety of devices that Polycom provides and supports for Skype for Business and Server and online, and they are bringing all of those capabilities into Teams as well and providing devices for Teams. In addition, we just made this announcement on Monday. We actually have a Real Connect for Teams service available, which helps you connect Cisco devices smoothly into Teams meetings, and this is generally available as of this Monday, as of 24th. With that, I will let Adam talk about the devices.
Thanks, Shri. Okay, so we're going to segue and talk a little bit about Polycom devices. And then after that, we're going to talk a bit about Cloud Video Interop and the Real Connect service that Shri just mentioned went GA on Monday. So first off, I want to just sort of level set on where you're at if you have existing 3-pip phones. And 3-pip phones, they're available from multiple vendors. Polycom has obviously been in this space for some time. Audio Codes, Yealink, they're also available there. And these phones can continue to register to Skype for Business Online because they're certified for Skype for Business Online. And when they make point-to-point calls or they join meetings, those meetings go through Microsoft's 3-pip gateway. And that gateway has been available for some time now. And the former, as in the point-to-point calling, that's something that's available when that Skype for Business Online account has been transitioned to Teams mode. The meetings join capability, that works whether it's a Skype for Business Online account in Islands mode or in Teams mode. So your phones ultimately can stay as is. Now the reason why we can't integrate those phones, as Shri mentioned earlier, is because the Teams platform is a managed infrastructure. We can't develop our Polycom stack to be interoperable anymore. Our stack is SIP-based, again, as Sri mentioned. So the approach there is to go with a native experience or a native application, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing to bear in mind is that in the past, Microsoft would publicize through their open spec documents the way in which partners could integrate. You know, Teams, as Sri mentioned, is being iterated on rapidly, and basically we're not in a position where we can keep writing and keeping up anymore. So we need a new approach. And Microsoft has given us an Android-capable client which we can use on our devices to give you a native experience with Teams. And it's a derivative of the existing mobile client. It's not the same, obviously. It's designed for IP phones and conference phones. And we're working on that initially with Trio, and then other desk phones following later. USB devices. USB support is now added. One of the common things that people get confused on is why is my device not working or giving me HID control? And when I say HID control, I mean why is it when I press the mute button, it's not muting my Teams client and vice versa? And why is it not hanging up and answering? So the thing to be aware of there is that if you run both Skype for Business and Teams at the same time, that won't work. So you have to close Skype for Business to make sure that that works. You don't have to uninstall Skype for Business, but it can't be running at the same time. Otherwise, there's this sort of HID conflict that happens. So USB devices will continue to function and be supported with Teams. Video endpoints, they can continue to be interoperable via the Cloud Video Interop service. And that's obviously become key because in the past, Polycom endpoints, non-Skype room system-based endpoints would obviously need, could integrate directly, whereas now they have to use initially the Cloud Video Interop service. So let's just break down into a bit more detail. I'm not going to walk through everything here, but there's a table in here that you guys can refer to, and this, this is evolving over time, but we've made some good progress to date. The slides will be available to take away later as well, just in case you're taking pictures. You don't need to. And obviously, just to go through some of the key highlights. So obviously, we have a Polycom MSR solution, which is a Skype room system-based endpoint that continues to work and will work with Teams. There was an update to that a few months back. Our VVX portfolio. And when I say VVX, I mean the classic portfolio, not the new VVX line that was recently introduced. That will continue to work through the gateway we talked about. The new VVX portfolio, it works with Skype on-prem, so that's fine on-prem, but not for Skype for Business Online or the Teams gateway. Our CX5100 products, they today support active speaker switching. I've had a number of people come up to me and ask about panoramic video. Ilya's session yesterday, I don't know if anyone went to that, he talked about the panoramic video coming next year. So that'll be delivered hopefully in the first half of next year. So for now, those work with active speaker switching only, panoramic with Teams coming soon. The Trio, you have multiple options. You can run it in 3-pip mode for voice and use it through the gateway. Or you could upgrade to Teams, and there is an upgrade to having it as a native Teams endpoint, and that's for both the 8800 and 8500, and that's coming in the next few months. Last but not least, Group Series is CVI for Teams. We are working on some other solutions there, and we also have the Callisto 7200, which is a new speakerphone device that's USB-based and will continue to work also. So from a very high level, when we talk about native versus the gateway, what does that mean? And what are the features I'm going to get on this gateway versus the native Android application? So there's a picture there of a Trio calendar. It looks Looks pretty similar on a VVX phone, but essentially, I've invited a VVX that's registered to Skype for Business online to a Teams meeting. And as you can see, the same experience is seen. I can join the meeting, and I can join with audio. But going forwards, that view and the application being run will be the Teams application, and that will give us additional features. One big feature, again, this was something that was announced in Elia's session, so if you weren't there, I recommend you see it. The admin portal is being updated, and this is the Skype and Teams admin portal. That's being updated to support device manageability, and that will start with voice devices. So we are bundling within our phones not only the Microsoft Android application, but also an Intune agent that allows Microsoft to push management and provisioning and monitoring to the device. So I'm not going to go through this one, but I'm just going to call out two key things to be aware of. One is obviously the look and feel is different. So if you're running and you're using a trio, for example, in 3-pip mode, for want of a better term, you're going to have the native UI on those devices that Polycom has developed. The minute you run the Teams application, obviously it becomes very Teams-centric. So if you're using Teams throughout for UC, then it's going to be a very familiar look and feel. Last one, and this one comes up quite a lot. You can't, if I'm having a point-to-point call with someone, and I want to escalate that to a conference, so I add someone else to a point-to-point call, that's something that doesn't work through the gateway. So my recommendation there is to schedule a conference, and then if you need to add people afterwards, you can do that through the gateway. So the Teams IP phones and the way that's going to look when it's available, and like I said earlier, first will be on Trio. We will continue to have what we call our Microsoft SKU. And this works well for us because it basically means that the out-of-box experience is a default Microsoft experience. So you as admins don't have to change that from a generic SIP mode to a Microsoft mode. And we're working on a new out-of-box experience that you can see a prototype of there, where you can choose which type of Microsoft experience you want. So in the case of a Trio, you could run it in Teams mode, you could run it in Skype for Business mode, or just have it as a USB peripheral and connect it to, say, a Skype room system. The other thing to be aware of is that conference devices will also have the ability, once you sign in, to sign in as either a personal device or a shared device. When it's in shared device mode, the calendar becomes a lot more prominent, and you can see your appointments more clearly because that's ultimately the home when you come in the room and you want to join a meeting. The existing hard buttons are used, and we basically have a HID stack that communicates with Microsoft's Android stack. So that means that when you press the mute button or the volume keys, it's going to adjust in the Teams application also. And as I mentioned earlier, we are planning on extending this to desk phones at a later date. The other device that we announced at this event is the Alara solution. And I've had a number of people come up to me and ask me, what does that do? What's new? How does it work? So I guess the key things to understand there is, obviously it's geared towards the mobile-first workers, but it has this new Teams button. And the Teams button is something that will be seen on both Bluetooth-based and USB devices that are newly introduced into these categories. And it's a contextual button. So ultimately, if you miss a call, it will flash and allow you to go to your missed calls. If you have an upcoming meeting, that button will allow you to join a meeting. So think of it as a multi-function button that does different things depending on events that come into it. The other thing is that because this is driven by a cell phone, the cell phone communicates with that dock via Bluetooth. So the other part of it is you can drive the Teams application from hard buttons if you want to, and that call control happens via Bluetooth. We also have Skype room systems, and these are also working with Teams. One of the things that we announced at this event, or we showed at our booth, was that we're working with our friends at HP, starting to bundle our peripherals to a non-audio equipped version of their room system. And then there's some other work coming in the pipeline as well. Again, Elio alluded to that in his session. Last but not least, before I transition over to Cloud Video Interop, another thing that still comes up a lot is what's the deal with TLS 1.2? What's my support for Link Phone Edition devices? So I just wanted to, again, just quickly level set on that. In fact, someone came up to me just before I presented today and said, is it coming? And it's not coming. And the reason why it's not coming is because there's a platform on these devices, it's Windows CE, and the version of Windows CE doesn't support TLS 1.1 or higher. And also, these devices they're out of support now. So mainstream support has ended for them. But you can still use them if all of your workloads are on premises, and that includes both Exchange and Skype for Business. And it obviously means that any of those on-premises workloads, you can't be tweaking them over to TLS 1.1 or 1.2. So bear that in mind. Okay. So let's move over to Cloud Video Interop, and I'm going to pass back to Shri.
Thank you. All right, so I briefly mentioned this earlier. Our big announcement this week, Cloud Video Interop through Polycom, available now. What is Cloud Video Interop? Many of you use native devices for Skype for Business as well as Skype for Business Online and Teams, so that's goodness. However, we do have a lot of customers that have a set of mixed devices in their environment. You might be a deployment where you are using Teams or Skype for Business for chat and presence and collaboration, but you might have Cisco or someone else for your UC solution, meaning you actually have devices through Cisco in your deployment. We have a group series over here, and this is a Polycom device, but for Teams, you're actually going to be able to connect the Polycom device through Video Interop. Effectively, what Video Interop is a cloud-based service that is done by our partners. We have multiple partners. Polycom is one of them that's available right now, that actually connects your third-party devices, any SIP or H323 devices, into Teams through this service gateway. We have different models of approach for this. Let me just go by it real quick. Okay, so we have a few models on how you can approach this one. We have a service-based model that is provided by two of our partners, and we have an enterprise software-based model that's provided by one of our partners. Bottom line for all of these things is all three partner solutions are Microsoft certified or certified for Microsoft Teams. These are the only three partners that we are working with today if you want to connect any SIP H323 device, non-native Teams devices into Teams. Again, these are enterprise ready. Earlier I spoke quite a bit on how Teams operates on Azure. These services are fundamentally built on Azure. They are co-engineered with Microsoft, and Microsoft components that we have delivered in order to light up these services and product is actually also based in Azure. So Azure is a very integral part of what Teams is, and any of the services that are beginning to use Teams, whether it's native or whether it's partner services as well. The other thing I want to call out here is this picture. When you see a picture like this, you would probably tend to assume that these are all Teams clients. Not necessarily. A couple of them, or maybe all of them, can actually just be coming from Cisco or Polycom devices, completely orthogonal to the Teams ecosystem. However, from a Teams user experience, they all look like native endpoints We will be able to see all of them in the roster. You can individually control each of these third-party devices. You should be able to take them out of the meeting. So effectively, what we have done is what we are calling as a gateway mode. This is not a VMR mode. This is basically where each individual participant or VTC has this has a first-party experience from within the Teams client. The cloud, the Azure portion I already mentioned. Moving on to the next one, like I said, we have multiple partners. These are our 3 partners. They are all available in the booth, but Polycom is available today. They have done a great job and we have released it as of this Monday. Okay, little bit about the reference architecture. Again, I'm going to bring you back into that why Azure is so important for us here. So third-party device, and you have a bunch of Teams ecosystem in the cloud. What our partners have done is basically built the Teams interop bot. This bot is actually based on the same concept and framework that's provided by the bot framework. So effectively, they have just used the same thing to build a bot using the SDK that Microsoft has provided. So the communication services SDK is the one that Microsoft has provided to all 3 of our partners, and they have used it to build the video interop capabilities. I do also want to call out that this communication SDK and the services behind it are not just powering CVI, but they will be powering video interop or CVI as well as IVR and a lot of other third-party scenarios. We actually made a public preview announcement for this communications SDK at Ignite as of Tuesday. So that is also available. The communications SDK uses graph APIs in order to light up the scenario. So we are following that Microsoft principle of anything we are exposing it to our customers, developers and partners needs to fall under that one Microsoft graph approach, and that's exactly what we have taken for video interop as well. So it's precisely the same thing that's powering all of these capabilities. Again, the critical component here is that entire interop bot, regardless of who your partner you pick, is always hosted in Azure on Windows systems. The reason why that is important is Teams has done a whole lot of optimization to work best in Azure because it's basically born and built in Azure. Not just from the signaling perspective, but a lot of optimization on the media side as well. So the partners' capabilities, like Polycom here, they have been in the video interop space along with us for a very, very long time. They have built up a set of skill set on how do you do media translation between these non-native devices into what Microsoft understands. So they are basically bringing in that capabilities that they already have in their ecosystem and in their products as to how to do the encoding, decoding, translation, optimization, how do you scale for this kind of infrastructure, and basically they are bringing their level of skill set into this partnership with us. Also, Polycom specifically is a cloud-based solution for us over here. It's basically Real Connect service that is entirely hosted in the cloud. We do have other partners. If you want to do self-hosting of your video infrastructure, we do have that capability with another partner as well. But Polycom is just literally turnkey. You just have to provision it, and that's about it. One level deeper into this architecture over here. So I've broken what are the basic services we are talking to on our Teams side. So we have platform service, which basically handles signaling. We have media pass or media platform as a service, which actually does media in the cloud for us, as well as Teams conferencing services. What we have delivered to our partners is not just one SDK, although I just called it as a communications SDK. It's actually 2 pieces. One is a platform SDK, and the other one is a real-time media SDK. The platform SDK can be used for all scenarios where media is remote. Like for example, if you have an IVR where you just want to do a remote media and you don't have any local media processing, all you need to use is the platform SDK. For some other specific scenarios where you actually have to do local media processing, you need both the components. In our scenario over here for video interop, what Polycom is doing is basically using our real-time media SDK, getting that media from the cloud, processing the raw media streams, converting it into a format that the services understand, and therefore, in the end, passing it over to the VTC device over here. This is a bit of a high-level view on exactly how this thing works from an admin as well as an end-user perspective. So far, we have talked about the architecture and a bit of the nitty-gritty details there. So let's say you are now interested. You do have a Cisco device. You are interested. You want to say, how do I get started? Okay. As I mentioned, we do have multiple partners, but you have to decide what partner is the right approach for you. Once you pick a partner, you actually work with the partner, and the partner gives you certain provisioning information. I specifically put tenant key. Tenant key is nothing but your Office 365 GUID representation. It's basically your Office 365 tenant. Instead of punching in a GUID and your VTC device, we're just giving you a small 9-digit code that you can just use it if you want to reach the partner's IVR. That tells them, hey, this is coming from Contoso, or this is coming from Fabricam. So where is the device connection coming from? Once that provisioning is happened, once that data is given to the tenant admin basically effectively runs a couple of commandlets. These commandlets are already available publicly and documented if you want to go and take a look at the Teams PowerShell module. So they just run these PowerShell commandlets, and either they can enable the entire tenant for a particular video interop service partner, or they can selectively pick and choose. For example, in Microsoft, we have a bunch of users using Polycom on the Microsoft side. However, for LinkedIn though, we have a bunch of users using a different partner as well. So as part of this, we have enabled not just having selective users enabled or disabled, we also have ability to have multiple partners for video interop in your organization. Once a user is enabled, all the enabled user has to do is, they don't even have to know that they're licensed for interop. All they do is just go to your Outlook client, just create a Teams meeting, or go to your Teams client, either it's desktop or mobile, just create a Teams meeting and those coordinates will show up. Adam here is going to show a little bit of what those coordinates are going to look like. From a third-party VTC perspective, you have a couple of ways to join. Either you can give the tenant key entirely and hit the partner's IVR, and then give the conference ID. This is similar to how you do a 1-800 number and then you give your conference ID in order to connect via your PSTN conferencing. Or you could just do one-touch dial if you have an integrated room where it is backed up by an exchange, and then you can just read the calendaring and rest of the information. Bottom line is that any of these methodologies, the third-party device can join into the Teams meeting. What is it that you, as an IT admin, need to keep in mind while you are considering interop, whether this is right for your company or not? There are a few things. I started the session with finding out how many folks are Skype for Business on-prem server versus online server and using Teams, right? There's a migration path here. If your organization is moving from Skype for Business on-prem server directly into Teams, who are you using today? Do you even need interop? If so, who are you using today? How is it that you can bring that migration over and work with our partners to see how this would work for you? Same story for Skype for Business Online. In fact, Polycom today is our only certified supported partner for Skype for Business Online, and we are bringing them over to us for Microsoft Teams as well. Again, I mentioned you might have mixed devices in your room, and you want to figure out what would be the right approach for you, or just maybe a pure cloud meeting solution, and how do you want to use that. As an admin, I would expect you to think through and ask certain questions, which is, do you have a large deployment or do you have 10 VTCs? Do you have certain key users in your environment who always schedule meetings that third party, like a third company actually joins with a VTC device, whereas your entire internal infrastructure is basically a cohesive Teams ecosystem? So those are some of the questions you need to keep in mind. I also mentioned about whether you have an existing interop provider and if they are certified. Interop for Teams only works with our certified providers. If you have someone else that is currently not in one of our certified partners, we will not be able to bring them forward when you try to do video interop with Microsoft Teams. a few other requirements. Do you need to be in government clouds, or do you need to be in, do you need to have real-time monitoring and other capabilities as well? With that, I'm going to give it to Adam so he can go into Polycom's way of interop over here.
Thank you very much, Sri. It's great. So we've been on, Sri mentioned some of this earlier, so I won't dwell on it too much, but we've been on quite a journey around video interop. We are going to show, as Sri mentioned, a demo. I'm going to configure the service and show you a demo of what it looks like when you're joining the service. But we've also been, and this is something I'm kind of proud of, we're also the creator of the whole sort of scheduled video solution with Microsoft. There's a number of people in our CTO team that helped create it. And as Sri mentioned, we're the only CVI partner today for Skype for Business Online. So going back a little bit, when we launched Skype for Business Online Interop, and we refer to that as Real Connect for Office 365, we launched it with a whole host of features, and we got a lot of feedback. A lot of the features Sri's just mentioned, obviously content was key, given that we're bringing standards-based room systems into those meetings. Those room systems do content with H.264. Microsoft had just started doing that with their video-based screen sharing. Now with Teams fully video-based screen sharing enabled, that really helps us. And there was a number of other things. So we heard from customers they wanted concurrency-based licensing and not user-based licensing. And some other things they didn't like was the fact that they needed to give Polycom the ability to become a cloud solution provider. So this is now something which is optional. It's no longer required unless you need to do both Skype for Business Online and Teams together. And the same license in our case is applicable to both Skype for Business Online and Teams. So you have full license portability there. We also learned that customers wanted us to host what we call a one-touch dial solution. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but essentially it's the magic piece that allows you to walk into a room and just click one button and join the meeting. And that's across both Polycom and Cisco endpoints. The other thing is scheduling. We heard a lot of people saying, I don't necessarily want to schedule things in Outlook, whether it's Mac or PC, and I don't want to make sure that on the Windows side, I have to run the click-to-run version of Office. And I don't want to have to run Office 2016 either. So with the new Real Connect for Teams service, you can schedule from your mobile, you can schedule from Outlook on Windows, both MSI and click-to-run. And it's been announced at this event, so I can say it, Mac and OA is also planned in the future. The last thing that came up a lot, and it's not on this slide, but it came up in Sri's session earlier in the week, was the ability to schedule meetings as delegates as well. So this was another thing that we looked at. So we ran a tap for a number of months with Microsoft. We had a number of very large customers. We got a few testimonials from a few of them. It was a very successful tap. And part of the reason why it was so successful for us and we were able to iterate so quickly. So for example, when we launched TAP, we didn't have half the feature set that we have now that we've gone GA. And going back to what Sri showed you earlier, we took there were multiple approaches we could have taken. And one, we made the decision in the end, was to completely re-architect our platform. So nothing that we've built for Real Connect for Teams has been shipped to customers. It's a completely new service. And we decided to host that within Azure together with the SDK and with the bot SDK as well. And as Sri mentioned earlier, that's then able to interface directly to the Teams microservices through the Azure private network. So from a service perspective, we had awesome connectivity. We're leveraging Microsoft's media platform to do all of the encoding and decoding. And obviously, we're handling the standards-based room systems, so the left side, if you like, of that Polycom service. The other thing that comes up a lot is, okay, how are you managing, how are you ensuring that you can scale, both scale and also give me the right level of connectivity from where my video endpoints are located? For those of you that are familiar, there was a bit of an Azure blip a few weeks ago. Because of the architecture that we've chosen, we were completely unaffected by that. And that's because we have a failover mechanism that we built that allows endpoints to automatically go to the next available Azure instance. And we do that via DNS load balancing. So we're using something called Azure Traffic Manager. So when an endpoint dials into a service, and in this case, this endpoint's located on the West Coast, the domain resolution for v.plcm.vc basically resolves to a local Azure data center. If that Azure data center goes down, then it automatically updates that record and takes the endpoint to the next available instance. So we've got an outage, and instead that record now takes us to the next data center, which in the case of this endpoint is the West Coast. And we've got this same design deployed globally throughout our service. And this is available already within our service as of Monday. Some of the other things that come up when people participate in a trial of the service, and incidentally, when you do leave the room, there's 2 orange folks at the back there. If you are interested in a free 60-day trial of the solution, they'll scan you and we'll get you signed up. But when people join, one of the things that comes up quite often is the network configuration. So depending on the way your organization is configured, your endpoints may be routed out of your network through some standards-based video firewall traversal mechanism. And on that list there, we've got Cisco, we've got our Real Presence Access Director, and also the video border proxy from Polycom as well. Those solutions are often leveraged. They're supported by us as a part of the service. And we actually have services as well to help you configure it. Ultimately, we have a test calling address, which you can use, and you can see it there. And that allows you to know whether your endpoint is configured, it's working, and there's no network issues. So I'm not going to go through these ports, but it's a good reference slide. So let's go through enrollment. So obviously, the first thing you're going to get when you enroll, and that could be a trial or it could be through a purchase, is you're going to get a license key. And the license key, once it's activated, will appear within the web application that we use, and it will tell you what the license key is and what your license entails. So in this case, it's a Teams license. You've got 10 concurrent calls, and it tells you the start date and end date, and the start date's obviously based on when the license is created. The next thing you need to do is you need to think about performing the consent. Now, Sri mentioned earlier that we use the bot framework to join meetings. And you need to allow Polycom's unique identifier for our bots to join your meetings. So by performing that consent, you're allowing us to join the meetings. And you can see there that we're requesting certain privileges to allow us to join the meetings. So as a global admin, you can do this one-time consent, and it allows the bot to join the service. The next thing you're going to need to do is the PowerShell setup. I'm going to go through that in a moment, so I won't go through it here. So let's move on and go through the PowerPoint. So I'm going to do it live, but before I do it, I'm just going to explain what it all means so you understand what's in that PowerShell and why we're asking to do it. So the first thing is there's some new PowerShell commandlets that were introduced with this service. So the first one here is new CS Video Interop Service Provider. And if you go into your tenant and you do a get for that commandlet, you'll see there's a number of providers that are listed. There's, as Sri mentioned, there's Pexit, BlueJeans, and Polycom. And you have the ability to have multiple providers enabled within your tenant. In this case, we're going to create a new provider for Polycom. And you can see we have an Azure AD application ID. So that ID there, or that GUID, is the ID for our bot. Now, you don't need to add that up front. But the reason why I'm recommending that here is because we're going to use that in a moment to allow us to have VTCs bypass the lobby. And the reason why that's important is because if you have an all VTC meeting and you have no Teams clients joining that meeting, you need to have a way to allow just the VTCs to bypass the lobby. This was something that came up loud and clear when Sri and I worked on the Office 365 version of this service, or Skype for Business Online. The next piece is the tenant key. The tenant key is a unique key that every tenant gets. And it's a key which you can see there is 123456. You can dial that and hit an IVR. In our case here, we're going to specify the tenant key, and we're also going to update the hyperlink in the invite. And that hyperlink is what gives you the alternate dial strings for different types of endpoints. A lot of things get keyed off of this. So if you're using one-touch dial and using scheduling on your endpoint, this needs to be specified correctly. And the good news is that we now have an automated page where you, as a tenant admin, can copy and paste, and it's automatically populated with the right tenant key and the right information, or instruction URI, based on your tenant information. The second part you need to do is, once that's created, you need to either grant that policy to a single user or globally apply it across your tenant. And we're going to do that also in a moment. The final piece, which is optional, is to enable lobby bypass. And that's just a simple one line there that we add, which basically says allow app guest joins as authenticated. And that's specific just to VTCs. If you enable that, it's not going to mean that Skype for Business users that are federated with you or other guests are going to bypass the lobby. The same, Teams. The same Teams workflow will apply for Teams users. So let's switch over here to the right screen. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly re-authenticate here, because chances are I've lost my connection. I'm going to pray to the internet gods that this is going to happen reasonably quickly. I'm going to also bring up my magnifying glass so that we can see what's going on. Minimize that. So the first command that I'm going to execute is we're going to define the video interop service provider, and that was the first slide that we covered earlier. So let's just copy all of that. And wait for our connection to complete. And what's happening here is essentially I'm connecting as a global admin. The remote PowerShell setting up. It's downloading all the commandlets that I need. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, you should have done it earlier. Deja vu. We had the same problem yesterday. Sorry? Oh, there you go. Thank you. See, my audience is more helpful than yours. Okay, so let's paste that command we talked about earlier. So we've gone ahead, we've created our new provider, and what you can see there is that we've created the provider. The identity is Polycom. We've got the Azure AD application ID that's populated. We've got our tenant key defined, and our instruction URI, which I'm going to show you in a moment, is also populated. But we haven't yet set the bypass for lobby, so we'll do that in a moment. But before we do that, we're going to grant this to me, my account. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to go in and I'm going to set lobby bypass because I don't want to have to admit VTCs through the meeting. And that's done. So now we're all set. We're going to show that user and what it looks like when you have an invite. Now, what I will say is I'm going to use one I prepared earlier. And I'm going to do that because in some cases it can take up to around 8 minutes. It can take 10 minutes? Okay, so it can take up to 10 minutes. So obviously we're going to fast forward things. I have an invite that I created earlier. So in this invite here, and I may need to zoom out. There we go. And let's see if we can zoom back into that section there. Yeah. So because this user has been activated and the policy has been assigned, you can now see some new coordinates at the bottom of that invite. And that gets automatically populated. And the existing Teams Outlook add-in has populated it. I could schedule that within the Teams client as well, or I could use the Teams mobile app also. But you can see here that we have our tenant key. In this case, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a slightly different number. And we have a VTC conference ID, which is not the same as the PSDN conference ID. And we have a hyperlink. And this hyperlink, when we click it, basically tells us what the dial string is to join that meeting. And that's this dial string here. Now, if for whatever reason I'm having issues, I can see other alternate dial strings as well for different endpoints. And I can see my test call address. Bear in mind, this is something that would be used by the far end, someone outside of your organization. If you're in the organization, when you join the meeting, you'd have a slightly different experience. So let's bring up our endpoint. And in this case, we've got a group series endpoint. And we've scheduled our meeting. And I'm just going to bring that up here so I can see it. Excuse me. Oh, never mind. I'll peer over there. That's fine. So as you can see on the home page here, on the home screen, we've got some scheduled meetings. Now, this endpoint is talking to our one-touch dial service, and that's included as a part of the solution. And what that means is that if anyone sends a Skype for Business invite or a Teams invite to the mailbox for this system, it'll automatically update my calendar, and this is something that works for both Polycom and Cisco endpoints. So I'm going to go to my Teams meeting. I'm going to point this way. So we've got our Teams meeting there. I'm going to join, and hopefully we've got some people on the far end. I think some folks are at the booth, because this is my conference they're using over at the Polycom booth. And we've joined the meeting, and the first thing you'll see that happens is that the layout starts to build. We're getting video streams back from various locations. And obviously, this will update based on who's actively speaking. And if we look there, we can see we've got a Cisco SX20. We've got someone connected via Teams. And then we've got we've got a Teams client, Takeshi there, and also a Skype room system. So we've got different types of endpoints. And basically, it all looks like a relatively normal experience that you expect on your VTC. I can also join here. So if we switch back to my PC, which is on, I believe, 7. So I'm going to join over here. I'm going to join with audio off. You can see the Teams experience also is pretty similar. Now, the other thing we can do here is we can share content. Maybe we can get someone on the far end to share some content. Otherwise, I'll do it here, but I'm feeling lazy. See if they respond to me. No, they're not feeling responsive. I'm going to share some content from here. I'll live dangerously. So I'm going to share my meeting. No, I'll share my PowerShell. So I'm sharing that here. And if we go back to my Polycom endpoint, which is on, I believe, this one, you can see that the PowerShell is being shared with our group series system. And obviously, if the video endpoint had multiple screens, you'd see content on one screen and video on the other. You can switch, play around with the layout if you don't like the content at the bottom or you don't like having the video. You know, that's just the standard video configurations that you can do on your endpoints, whether it's Polycom, Cisco, life-size, whatever. So that was a little demo of the meeting. Let's switch back to our PowerPoint. And we'll move on a bit. We did the demo. And we talked about the invite. Let's fast forward a bit here. Showed you that. Okay. So just to finish off, before we have some Q&A, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the one-touch dial solution. This is something which used to be an on-premises solution, but is now something that's fully hosted. And it basically is an admin-based web portal. So you as admins can go in, you can add your mailboxes for all of your video endpoints. So these could be existing room mailboxes, or it could be a new mailbox. And basically, when we receive any invites to that mailbox, we'll translate it for you and basically update the schedule on the endpoint. Now, in the case of Cisco endpoints, we do that through their XML API that they have. And for Polycom endpoints, we directly support Exchange Web Services. So if it's a Polycom endpoint, nothing more is required. Nothing on-premises is needed. But if it's Cisco, I'm going to just talk you through the architecture for something we call Cloud Relay. So Cloud Relay is a virtual appliance. It's very lightweight, something that's deployed on premises, and it can be deployed in different regions. So we recommend deploying more than one in each region. If, for example, one went down in any regions, the other would take over. If you want to keep the signaling traffic within the same region as the VTC, that's something you can do as well. And the way that architecture works is essentially you have your mailbox, which is defined within Exchange. It doesn't have to be Exchange. It could be we support other mail providers as well. But in this case, we're going to talk about Exchange, and Exchange could be on-prem or it could be online. And our cloud is configured by you via a service account to talk to that mailbox. And when a new invite comes into that mailbox, we receive it, and we basically perform a translation. Once the translation is made, which is pretty immediate, we send that information via a secure tunnel, and we're using Azure Service Bus to do that. We send that information back, and it's an outbound connection that is made to our Azure instance. Once that outbound connection is made, we can talk back to the on-prem Cloud Relay. So you don't need to open any inbound ports on your firewalls. Once that information is sent back to the on-prem Cloud Relay, we then relay that information or push that information into the Cisco endpoint and the calendar on the endpoint, again, as I mentioned earlier, using that XML API. So we have to have that enabled. So that's a new thing that we introduced around 2 months ago, I want to say. If there's any other questions on that, please feel free. But we are now at the end of the presentation, so we've got about 15 minutes for questions. Please feel free to come up to the mics. If you do leave early and you do want a trial, as I mentioned, visit any one of our orange T-shirts at the back there. We seem to have lost one of them. And they'll scan you. Thank you very much. Hi.
Adam. So like everything we're looking at today, it's all about like meet me in the middle on my team's meeting infrastructure. Are there any plans in the future to support anything the other way, like Like if I'm on a team certified device in a meeting room and having some interop back out to a standards-based environment.
So your question is, if you have a Skype room system, how can you enable that to dial out to a standards-based meeting invite?
Correct.
So if the invitee had a cloud video interop service, they could do it. There are some solutions which support the ability to dial out and into them with Skype for Business, but there's nothing for Teams in that area. So probably the answer there is if you as an organization are doing a lot of standards-based video calling, you may want to think about retaining a standards-based video endpoint alongside your Skype room systems. Thanks. Yeah, hi.
Are you FedRAMP certified?
Sorry?
FedRAMP.
We're working on that. Yeah, we are actively working on that. I'd love you to have a conversation with one of the Polycom people over there. But yeah, that's something we're hoping to launch soon.
And then, sorry, I'd follow up on the Cisco piece.
Yeah.
Are you talking directly to the endpoints or through VCS or CMS to do that?
When we perform the scheduling, we're talking directly to the endpoint.
Do we have to do any configuration on CMS or VCS to allow that, or just on the device?
No, you just have to enable it on the device. The only thing we recommend is that you don't use scheduling from both us and from VCS at the same time. So you have to pick your calendar provider.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, question over there.
Yeah, quick question. Since it's hosted in Azure, is it available in all Azure regions globally?
The short answer is no, because there's a lot of them. We've handpicked ones that make sense based on where our customers are, which is typically globally. And we've also picked Azure regions where they have Azure Container Services as well. So every Azure data center is not built equally. So we have a good geographic spread, but not in every one of them.
Okay. Yeah, we're a global company, so it's going to kind of come into play.
We have a global footprint in Azure, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Hi. Quick question. Can you clarify the path forward for existing VVX end stations to be Teams ready? Say like a 411 or 201? I think you may have touched on this, but
Yes.
I came in a little late.
Oh, okay. So yeah, if you have existing VVX phones, they will continue to work through Microsoft's 3-pip gateway. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Hi.
I'd like to also ask a question on global availability. I would assume that it's tied to where your O365 tenant is provisioned.
Actually, no, it's not. The Azure service or the Azure location that is used is basically tied to the video endpoint. So as a video endpoint, when you dial in, you are going to connect to the nearest Azure instance to that endpoint. We have a good footprint in that regard. And then once we're on the Azure network, or you're on the Azure network, that then happens, internally within Microsoft's private backbone.
That was exactly my question. If I've got a tenant that's provisioned in North America, and I've got video endpoints that are over in Asia Pac, I don't want to traverse the pond, so that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, they're going to use a local POP, and then the rest of that gets hauled through Microsoft's backbone. Cool. Yeah, question over there.
Yeah, yesterday, Skype for Business Server 2019 did not show any 3-pip devices. Is that a mistake in there, or is it not supported yet?
Yes, so everything I've been told by Microsoft, and you can keep me honest here, Sri, is that existing 3-pip phones will be supported with Skype for Business Server 2019 as well.
Okay, but yesterday they did not show it, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, we've been told that. Yeah, hi.
If we have existing RPAD and Real Connect on premise today, and we keep all of our Polycom devices and Skype devices, and then as we move those devices to Teams, will all that interop, or is it like you swing it over all at once?
So I think your question was, you have an on-prem deployment of Real Connect. Will that be able to bring you to Teams? Is that right?
Or I guess you've got devices that are talking that today. Can you swing a device over to the cloud version of Connect, and then it still talk back to the other devices?
Yeah. So you can use your existing infrastructure to dial those devices out of your organization and use the Cloud Video Interop service. As far as your on-prem Real Connect working with Teams, that is something that we're hoping to do later next year.
Okay. All right. So basically choose to migrate Real Connect to the cloud, or you wait until it's available on-prem. Okay. Perfect.
Sure. Hi.
I have a question regarding modern authentication, and specifically for VVX Phone Trio as well. When you are on-premise or online or on Teams, will it be available only using a web interface, or is there a plan to have a firmware that will allow it directly from the phone?
So I think, so you mentioned redundant authentication.
Modern authentication.
Sorry?
Modern authentication.
Web authentication. Oh, modern authentication. Sorry, so we support modern authentication already on our phones today.
For every type of deployment, for on-premise?
So all of the VVX phones and the Trio phones, they support modern authentication.
Okay. And is it only through the web interface, or is there a plan to have it through the firmware?
So right now, that's supported through web authentication for Skype for Business online accounts. What is coming soon, first for VVX, is support for web sign-in for on-prem Skype for Business users that are using our phones as well. So first with VVX and then with Trio.
Thank you.
Sure.
One more question here, please. We have a few Skype for Room systems, the very old one that were done by Smart, for example, the big panels. Are there any plans of supporting that with Teams?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I don't know what it is. The acoustics.
Skype for Room version 1.
Yeah.
Very first that came out.
Skype Room System V1.
Yeah, is there any plan to support that with Teams?
I presume you're talking about CX8000?
We have a few by Smart.
Sorry?
We have a few done by Smart. Manufacturer is Smart.
Okay. Well, so the story generally with Skype Room System, and this was in Ilya's session yesterday, and he went through a lot of detail on it, is that Crestron have an upgrade path for RL systems. If you bought a Polycom CX8000, that's an RL1, so there isn't an upgrade path for that. And then Smart have an upgrade path. Crestron have a hardware replacement for Smart systems.
Okay. You didn't talk about my vendor, so I guess I need to check with them. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yes?
Smart does have a software upgrade path for Link Room systems, so you can go to V2.
Okay.
It's out now.
Fantastic, thank you.
My question is, I've heard you're working on FedRAMP certification. Those of us that are still waiting for Teams to appear in the GCC High Cloud, can we assume that you will appear sometime after Teams is available, or will you be concurrently, or is there a plan?
I guess all I can say at this point is we hope to, but yeah, we're kind of working with Microsoft on that. We're not quite there yet.
And the provisioning story for trios to actually get them signed in to either Skype for Business Online or Teams is a bit tedious at the moment, having to be in front of the phone to get the URL. Is there a better provisioning story coming? It's not so bad if I have 2 or 3, but if I have hundreds or thousands, it's not really practical or scalable.
Yeah, so you can do it with a management server. So if you have either a real presence, what do we call it? Resource manager, thank you. If you have Resource Manager, you can make that easier. You can also now use PDMS, which is our hosted management solution.
PDMS is cloud only, though, and we have a...
Yes, so you can use Resource Manager on-prem. Will help you there. And then the other thing is you can actually do it through the web UI as well. Again, if you've got hundreds of them, that's
thousands.
obviously not. Yeah, that's not the way you would go. Sure.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is for environments that are currently using the BTOE companion app for the VVX phones. Is there going to be further development into that, or is that going to stream more towards the service you're offering? So currently it signs them into Skype for Business online. Will that function the same way with Teams down the road, or?
No. So the Teams model for pairing is going to be slightly different. It's going to be a Bluetooth-based pairing, and it's something that's specific to the Teams application and the Teams clients, mobile and desktop. So BTOE will not be something that will support Teams, I'm afraid.
Okay, so in terms of the coexistence that Skype and Teams have today, when do you see that being phased out or end of life? Best guess, a year, 2 years?
I couldn't comment on that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.